All right, the conventional wisdom in Washington is that the abortion issue has energized the left and caused midterm election races to tighten. But one pollster, Robert Cahaly of Trafalgar Group, believes that not only is a pro-life position good policy, it's also a strong political strategy for the GOP. Join me now here in studio to discuss this is Robert Cahaly. He's a senior strategist and pollster for the Trafalgar Group. Robert, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Great to be here.
All right, so you seem to have the corner on the market on this wisdom because it looks like, with the exception of a few, like Lindsey Graham, who was on the program earlier this week, a lot of Republicans listening to pollsters, and I would think the left, and they're running for the high grass on this issue.
Well, what they've done is they've gotten hoodwinked into believing that they don't know how to frame this. I mean, just as Senator Graham said, when Republicans are talking about 15 weeks and restrictions that are that limited, they're at 60, 80% of where the public is.
Right.
And when the other side's talking about partial birth abortion and third trimester, I mean, that's what the public is not. I mean, that's less than 11% of the public.
So you've been polling this. In fact, I used your numbers this morning when I was on C-SPAN. 60% of the public is with the position that Lindsey Graham has. Only 40% are where Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are with abortion till birth.
And if you draw the lines at just a little further and you just go to heartbeat, you only drop to 55. So that position that we found as the most extreme position, third trimester, partial birth, that's only 11% of the public. So it is a very small position.
But the media is helping the Democrats on this issue.
There's no question the media is fixated on this, and there's been a lot of people buying in and fixating on this. But what we've seen is since the student loan thing came out, we've seen a completely different focus, and that issue has taken the energy out of this one, and that is as motivational for conservatives, for working people, as the abortion is for some of the extreme on the left.
Well, I want to play a clip from MSNBC. Play clip, I think it's clip 13.
This egg from that we got today in this form of this horrible national abortion ban, I think it's going to do that work for Democrats so that they can continue to leverage the momentum they have, and they can continue to draw the contrast with the extremist MAGA Republicans that they've painted them to be, that Republicans have lived up to being, because they've shown that they're hell-bent on controlling and punishing women and pregnant people.
All right, that was political analyst for MSNBC, Juanita Tolliver. So that's what we're hearing on the press. How are people responding to that?
Well, first of all, I can't really speak to how women and pregnant people are responding.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for pulling that out, because, you know, they get it wrong from the beginning. Pregnant people, it's pregnant women, but they've become so intoxicated with this political correctness that they look ludicrous.
Well, what we've seen is now abortion is starting to actually fade behind the border as a motivating reason to vote. And so, I mean, this is their holy grail. This is what they're riding to election. And what I will tell you is the intensity on the thing they care the most is dying down as more and more the positions of average Americans are more on the side of the 15-week limit, of the heartbeat limit. And a lot of the states where abortion people really want to have abortions, they don't have any restrictions coming anyway. So what we're seeing is the student loan, and we're seeing the new attention to the border eclipsing this issue as a motivational thing.
So the Democrats are probably not smart running on this issue.
This is not their winning issue, because it's also their wedge issue. Because for every Democrat activist who is fired up about abortion and carrying a sign and has abandoned the abortion should be safe, legal, and rare position, which was their previous position, there are Hispanic voters who say, they no longer represent me.
Good point. In your data on the Hispanics were more supportive of restrictions at the 15-week mark than white voters.
Absolutely. But the more religious voters, more deeply held religious beliefs, the stronger the limitation is and the more limits they'd like to see placed on it. So the Democrat Party is literally taking a piece of its base a solid black vote and Hispanic vote they will depend on, and by being so one way on abortion is alienating themselves from voters they desperately need to maintain their coalition.
I mean, I think, it's more pronounced from looking at the crosstabs among Hispanic voters. I mean, this could be setting a future course when you consider the family issues, not just the abortion issue, but the education issue. And then when you combine the socialistic policies that many of these have tried to escape in Central and South America, when they see the Democratic Party embracing them, where do they go? They don't go to that party.
Absolutely not. So they've really picked a very silly hill to die on this one.
So how should Republicans be addressing this?
Well, what Republicans should do is talk about the things that everyone can agree on. And what you're finding a national consensus on is some kind of recognition that partial birth abortion, third trimester abortion is not acceptable. Now, where is the line to be drawn? And when you start with that, they get stuck on the other side of that line, and that's an easy place where you can divide the majority from them.
Well, I mean, let's take Lindsey Graham's bill, 15 weeks, and as I mentioned, I had him on the program earlier this week. I am pro-life from conception through birth. I mean, through life. I mean, it's just, I don't think we should have abortion at all. That's the way I voted. That's the way I've worked. But we have to find consensus, and that consensus is moving as technology and understanding grows. I believe Lindsey is right. We can find consensus at least with 70%, 60% of the American public on that issue. But look at where the Democrats are. They will not draw the line the day before birth. That's an extreme position.
Absolutely, and I've said for months, when Republicans are arguing about which exceptions, how many exceptions, they're not winning. When they're arguing about partial birth or third trimester, they are winning.
All right, Robert, we got to go up to a break. I want to come back. There are 5 states that will have abortion on the ballot this fall. I want to take a look at some of those states and how this might be affecting some of the races, as well as some of the other issues as we move toward the November elections. All right, so we've got about 5 states that have this on the ballot. I have 3 states, California, Michigan, Vermont, will have proposed constitutional amendments to enshrine abortion into their constitutions. Those are blue states for the most part. You got Kentucky and Montana restricting abortion. So abortion is going to be an issue. But your point is, based on what you see, is that it's not the issue Democrats had hoped and are trying to make it into.
It certainly isn't, because it's just it only activates a certain segment of the public. And what you're seeing is a much greater segment of the public is feeling victimized by inflation. A greater segment of the public feels offended by student loans. And there's another segment of the public that consider themselves Trump supporters, MAGA Republicans, who feel intimidated.
Yeah.
And then there's yet others who are upset by the border. So there are a lot of things that it's a crowded dance card, and abortion just not taking the place on it they thought it would.
I want to go to one of those issues in just a moment, the intimidation, because I think that goes to President Biden's speech in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. But before I do, the intensity. You look at voter turnout, and it's roughly equal. You see polling, it's roughly equal. But it's the intensity on issues that make a difference on Election Day. Where's the intensity right now?
Right now, the Republicans have the lead on the intensity, and I would argue that's why Biden did this speech. He is trying to wake up Democrats and to create this idea of this threat, because he's got to sound like there's a 5-alarm fire. That's what his goal is right now. I think the Democrats are probably see better. I generally think the Democrats are better pollsters than Republicans, and so I think they've realized they have a problem before the Republicans knew it. And so they're out there trying to gin up their base and make them think this is the end of the world.
Okay, so in Philadelphia, on the steps of Independence Hall, the president basically, just berates half the American public, MAGA Republicans, and then he defines it indirectly by saying these are the people who support life, these are the people who support natural marriage, these are the people who support having control over their children's education. I mean, that's a lot of Americans.
That is, There's a lot of Americans declare war at one time. There's no question. And what the phenomenon we've seen is, 2016, we found it was kind of a shy Trump voter. People who had seen all the, the demonization of Trump supporters, called deplorables and all this stuff. And people were a little hesitant, especially on a live call, to admit they're voting Trump. And we had some vehicles to get around that. We helped identify those. But by 2020, it was, we were kind of in the midst of cancel culture, and people were harder to get. Republicans who didn't like Trump couldn't wait to take a poll, and Republicans who did were hesitant to participate. This year we have a different phenomenon. I call them submerged voters, and these are Republicans in the past who might have put a sticker on their car, might have put a sign in their yard, posted on social media, and taken polls, and they're doing none of those things. They feel very nervous. They tell us, they're reaching out to us directly on the internet and saying, hey, is this your poll? I saw it. I didn't want to take it. I didn't know who it was. Somebody keeping a list. But they've heard stories about the government monitoring Facebook. They've heard stories about banks starting to monitor their credit card transactions. So it's not an intellectual jump that somebody's trying to keep track of who people are saying in polls, and they're scared. So I predict that every poll, including ours, will underestimate Republican turnout.
We saw that back in 2004 and 5 when marriage amendments were on the ballot, where a lot of the voters did not want to say they supported natural marriage because of the hate that we get from the other side. And so as a result, the polls were off 7 to 10 points in some races. So you predicting that kind of a swing we might see?
Well, part of the problem if they're not taking polls is we can't predict it.
Yeah.
So it could be 1 point, it could be 3. I don't know. But I do know that we've seen too much evidence of it. I've heard too many people tell us, and it's just a phenomenon that is new and more intense than I've seen it before. But there are people who are just literally scared, and probably not justifiably scared that somebody's taking polls and trying to keep track of where they are. But it doesn't matter. They're scared. They're nervous, and like I say, they are submerged. They're underwater till Election Day. Nobody's going to see them. They're going to go and they're going to vote. But I don't think we're going to see them coming, and they're going to be very hard to count.
Well, I hope they show up in mass numbers. Robert Cahaly, always good to talk with you. Thanks so much for coming in the studio today.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having us.